there's like this compact made with these 5 states. You got like Arizona, Nevada, Utah, California, New Mexico. Now, there was a compact made in the 1920s that said, California, you get, from the Colorado Basin, right? So you get 70% of the water. Nevada, you get 60%. Utah, you get 60%. Arizona, you get 55%. New Mexico, you get 65%. So obviously, that's way more than 100%, right? When you total those up.
Yeah.
So this was never an issue for the last roughly 100 years because there was just enough water coming down. However, now we're having all sorts of water issues. And specifically as it comes through the Colorado Basin, we supply, the Colorado River supplies all the water for California, all the farming. 80% of the food that exists on people's tables comes from California in some degree. So the problem is all that's being litigated in court right now because we're having these water issues. California's going to win because they have the most money. Nevada kind of comes in second place because we kind of have the second most money. And it's also in our backyard. The problem is none of that is ever going to get litigated before water crises, come to fruition.
Yeah.
There's no chance. We're talking about like 10 years in litigation. So because of that, what we will see is that there will just have to be a hard stop on water exploitation. Now, here in Nevada, we're in a really unique situation, specifically Vegas. Not Reno, not the rest of Nevada, but specifically Vegas. So where we're going to see these huge water restrictions come in is when the water level at the dam gets to a certain point where it can no longer produce hydroelectric power for LA, for example, right? Then the water restrictions will just happen overnight, okay? And now the litigation's out the window.
Yeah.
You just won't fucking get water. So when that happens, everybody's a little bit fucked. Here's the unique situation about Vegas, though, and not just Nevada, but specifically Vegas. We get our water from the other side of the dam. Of those 5 states, of all those cities, of everybody involved in that, we get all of our water from a straw that comes from the river side of the dam.
Will we get it from the top or the bottom?
We get it from the bottom, but it comes from the other side of the dam.
Yeah, it's pretty close, though.
So all of the other water that has to come out that's, tied to these restrictions and the hydroelectric power that, goes to LA and stuff like that, we have not an infinite resource of water, but the thing is, when those restrictions happen, Vegas will not run out of water. It would be literally impossible because the amount of water that's been going out from the other side of the dam has been supporting a population of damn near 100 million people and farmland. Mm-hmm. Now, when that drops to a certain point where it's no longer producing hydroelectric power, we will have unlimited water, essentially, right? Because we'll be able to keep pulling from the riverside of the dam, as opposed to being allocated a ration of the water that comes out from the other side. So I've got a friend who owns a nuclear reactor company, and he's moving his whole operation here to Las Vegas for this reason. And this is how I got this kind of education from him about how the whole water situation is looking, is that, let's say that the water is going to drop to a level where it's, cannot produce more hydroelectric power. So there's going to be huge water cuts. Now, that amount of water that's been coming in, that's been supporting nearly 100 million people in farmland across the entire West Coast, is still at the availability of Las Vegas specifically because of how this whole thing was structured, cajillion years ago. So Vegas is in a really unique situation in that way. And I think economically, what we're going to see is a huge housing market bubble that's going to absolutely bust in places like Phoenix and Tucson. So you're already seeing limitations on expansion of suburbia in Phoenix and Tucson because the easiest way to lose water is through suburbia. So you have all these limitations coming in these other cities. and it's falsely inflating the price of real estate in places like Phoenix and Tucson.
Yeah.
Because now there's limitations as far as how much the grid can expand. So let's say in Phoenix or Tucson, okay, no, they're putting limitations on further growth of suburbia and stuff like that. So it's inflating the real estate prices there. However, when this crush happens and the limitations just kind of happen overnight because it's no longer viable to produce hydroelectric power for LA, those markets are going to crash. They're going to tank astronomically. However, here we do not have limitations on those things for a couple of reasons. One is because we have the greatest water reclamation system essentially ever devised, which is so ironic and outrageous that this mafia town, from back in the day, has this closed loop water reclamation system where we're reclaiming about 95% of the water that's used. The water that we lose, it all goes to, lawns, essentially. Even the casinos, the hotels, everything is on this closed loop. So for that reason, ironically, the larger we get, the larger the closed loop of water is, which actually makes us safer from a drought because the closed loop is larger. So for that reason, I think that the real estate here in Vegas is going to go absolutely to the moon at the same time that some of these other bubbles crash in places like Phoenix and Tucson and Albuquerque and stuff like that when these limitations come into play. Now, here is a sort of unique sort of whiplash to that based on our water. One of the biggest drawbacks to all of this in terms of the positive propensities that Vegas has in that whole conversation is that because this water is being recycled over and over and over again, it goes to a water filtration plant and then it goes back into the wash. Now, our microplastics here in Vegas are higher than virtually everywhere that exists on planet Earth because this water is getting recycled over and over and over again from the whole Colorado, over and over. So the microplastics in the water here in Vegas are so much higher than literally everywhere on planet Earth, except for a couple different places on the Pacific Rim, like Jakarta, for example. So if you don't have a reverse osmosis system, right?
Thank God I got one.
You're consuming so much plastic here, it's beyond belief. We're talking like a 10x compared to most other major cities in the entire world.
What if you have a well?
So you're safe there if you have a
Cool.
well.
I got a well and reverse osmosis.
There you go. You're lovely. So that's a bit of a unique sort of socioeconomic crisis that's kind of burgeoning. And then obviously it will affect the poorest populations the worst, just like every kind of humanitarian crisis.
Yeah.
And because we filter, we treat this water, but we don't treat it to remove microplastics because it would be literally impossible unless we had a nuclear reactor and about 40 football fields worth of water filtration plants set up. The amount of energy required to remove microplastics from the water is unbelievable, right? It's about 1,000 to 1 compared to just, removing some various chemicals and chlorine or things like that. So completely impossible for that to occur here. And because of that, the density, the amount of microplastics here in Vegas will essentially, especially when these water crises happen in the future and we have restrictions and then we have a housing boom here, that level of microplastics will go to the moon, and it's already at the moon. So we're going to have a really weird situation here in Vegas where Vegas has, seemingly indefinite water, but at the highest toxicity of microplastics in the history of humankind, which obviously leads to Alzheimer's and dementia and all these other issues. I mean, it's so hard to get microplastics out of the body. The most effective way to remove microplastics from the body is really through plasma donation. That's where we host a lot of microplastics, is in our blood plasma. And then men in general have higher levels of microplastics because we're not having a period. So we're not losing blood, right? And constantly sort of replenishing and replacing that. And so the microplastic situation here in Vegas is kind of a unique thing that's not really spoken about, especially with our senators or anything like that. I mean, they could give a fuck. But it will definitely come to bear. It will definitely kind of show its face soon.
Damn.
Yeah, crazy, right?
Well, glad we're ending on a positive note. I'm glad that I have the reverse osmosis filter and a well.
Yeah.
So I'm good. I'm going to start a water business. If you guys need water, let me know.
Do it, brother.
That's crazy.